Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today as part of my B-Tier guides for Dragon Age Origins Awakening, I'm going to take you through the build I recommend for Justice. This is a weapon and shield tank build that is unkillable, with the Spirit Warrior specialization, the new defensive talents from Awakening, and great bonuses from gear. I find that this aggressively protective, high survivability concept for the build fits Justice's character best, since he's a valiant spirit possessing the corpse of a Grey Warden, who are also legendary for their strength and resilience, so it should be extremely difficult to take him down, if not basically impossible. Before we get into the build, I'll take a moment to say a special thank you to my members. I appreciate all of you so much, and your support allows me to keep going. Joining as a member would help the channel a lot, but of course only do so if you want to and if you can afford it. I'm always grateful, even if you just like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment. Back to the guide. First, I have a few mods I always recommend. If you've watched my previous Awakening guides, you already know what these are, so you can skip to the next section, but I'm mentioning them in each guide for anyone who's new. Dane's Fixes is the most important mod that fixes a ton of bugs related to combat and implements missing item properties. It has a lot of extra quality of life improvements and balance adjustments, but it's completely modular, so you can just copy the parts of it you want and ignore the rest. If you use Dane's Fixes, I also recommend more detailed tooltips because it adds more detailed descriptions for all the abilities and item properties in the game. Also related to combat, Advanced Tactics. This mod fixes issues with follower AI and implements more options to choose from in the tactics menu. Having access to these extra conditions for your companion's tactics will help you set up tactics far more comfortably. Finally, Respecification DAO allows you to respecialize your characters. While in Awakening you can do this with a special item called Tome of Focus, the mod is better because you can respecialize your Warden from Origins before you import them into Awakening, which you may feel like you have to do if your build from DAO isn't very good. Tomes of Focus are only available after you complete the first mission of Awakening, so if you think your Warden is weak, I definitely recommend respecializing them with the mod. But the mod also allows you to do a partial respec, meaning attribute and ability points are reset, but the character keeps any specializations they already have. This is good if you haven't yet played Awakening, because you won't have the new specializations available from the start, and if you use a Tome of Focus, it will remove all specializations from a companion. That means you wouldn't be able to unlock the new specialization the companion already had until you buy the required specialization tome. With that out of the way, let's get into the build. When you recruit him, Justice has the following skills unlocked: maxed out combat training and 1 rank of vitality. Combat training is the one crucial skill for warriors and rogues, since each rank unlocks a new tier of weapon style talents. Having it maxed out is generally your first priority so that you can pick up the powerful high tier weapon talents as soon as they become available. In addition to unlocking those, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th ranks of combat training also grant the character some additional bonuses, plus 0.5 combat stamina regeneration, plus 2 attack, and finally plus 1 armor and plus 4 attack. Vitality grants plus 25 health per rank, so it's great that Justice already has 1 rank in this because he's a tank. You want his HP to be high for him to be able to withstand more damage. This is a perfect start in terms of skills for a tank warrior, so no notes here. Justice has the following starting abilities. From the warrior tree, Powerful, Precise Striking, and Taunt. Powerful is a passive that grants the warrior plus 25 health and a 10% reduction of fatigue. This fatigue reduction is impartial to armor type, so it's perfect for using heavy or massive pieces which naturally have high fatigue. An amazing passive useful for any warrior, but especially a tank who likes the extra health too. Precise Striking is a sustained talent that grants the warrior a bonus of plus 10 attack and a variable amount of melee crit chance based on their character level, while giving them a penalty of minus 10% to their attack speed. For this build, you don't care about the crit chance or the attack bonus, so you won't use this, but it is required for the next talent, so keep it. Taunt is an activated talent that generates a large amount of threat in a 10-meter sphere around the warrior. This is usually an essential talent for tanks because it immediately increases enemy hostility towards them. However, in Awakening you will have other great tanking abilities, so you may not need to use this often, if at all, after unlocking those new talents. From the weapon and shield tree, Justice has most of the DAO talents unlocked, other than the 4th talent in the 1st and 3rd rows. They're great to have, and you'll want to pick up most of the other ones, especially the new talents from Awakening. Shield Bash attacks a target with the warrior's shield and knocks them down unless they pass a physical resistance check against the warrior's strength. The Bash also has a plus 10 attack bonus. This is a great disabling ability you can use to interrupt an enemy from using an ability or casting a spell, but you can also just use it to knock them down to stop them from attacking or moving to make them easier to kill. Shield Pummel does a regular attack with 2 shield hits, stunning the target unless it passes a physical resistance check against the warrior's strength. Even if the attacks part of this ability don't hit, the stun will still occur if the target fails the resistance check. This is similarly useful to interrupt enemy abilities or to just disable an enemy for a bit. Overpower bashes the target with the warrior's shield 3 times. All hits are automatic critical strikes if they manage to connect, which means you can shatter a frozen or petrified target with this. If the last strike connects, the target is knocked down unless it passes a physical resistance check against the warrior's strength. If the target is successfully knocked down, their attack and defense scores will also be reduced by 5 for the next 10 seconds. In the base game, there is a bug that causes the Shield Mastery passive to reduce the damage of this ability, but if you have Dane's fixes, you don't have to worry about that. But frankly, the damage isn't why you're using this anyway. The knockdown is what you care about the most, plus the guaranteed critical hits for shattering purposes. Shield Defense is a sustained talent that grants the warrior +5 defense and missile deflection, but -5 attack. Various passives improve this ability, removing the attack penalty and adding extra bonuses to defense. It's a great defensive sustained, but for this build you don't really care about your defense and missile deflection that much, since your armor, health, and dodge chance are going to do most of the heavy lifting. So you will use Shield Wall instead, because that increases your armor. Shield Balance is a passive that directly improves shield defense, removing the -5 attack penalty. You don't care about this, but you need it to unlock the next talent. Shield Wall is a sustained talent that grants +5 armor and +10 missile deflection at the cost of reducing the warrior's damage by 20%. In the base game, the damage is not reduced, but with Dane's fixes, this effect is properly implemented. The Shield Expertise passive also makes a warrior immune to knockdowns while this mode is active, and that immunity is very important for a tank. But you will also get knockdown, stun, and slip immunity from another talent later on, so the main reason you want to keep Shield Wall active is for that juicy +5 armor. Shield Expertise is a passive that grants an additional +5 defense to the shield defense mode, and more importantly, makes the warrior immune to knockdown effects while using Shield Wall. This upgrade is a must for weapon and shield tanks, so it's great it's already unlocked when you recruit Justice. Shield Block is a passive that makes the warrior immune to backstabs on one side, and also makes enemies not receive a flanking bonus when attacking the warrior on that side. Pretty good protection against enemy assassins, but nothing special. Shield Cover is a sustained talent that grants +10 missile deflection to the warrior. The Shield Mastery passive further upgrades this mode by giving it an additional +10 missile deflection. Since you'll want to use Shield Wall for the armor bonus, you don't care about Shield Cover. This would only be particularly useful in a fight against a large group of archers, but there's none that I can think of in Awakening, so Shield Cover is useless to Justice's build. Shield Tactics is a passive that provides the warrior full immunity from backstabs and makes attackers no longer receive any flanking bonuses to attack. However, it doesn't protect against the rogue coup de grace ability when the warrior is paralyzed or stunned, meaning that in that situation they will still be backstabbed. This actually makes a much bigger difference than the Shield Block passive, since you'll be pretty much fully protected against backstabs, especially once you can use Beyond the Veil, because it will make you immune to stuns, so you'll be extremely unlikely to be affected by coup de grace backstabs as well. Finally, Justice has the Spirit Warrior specialization. It grants +1 Constitution and +5 physical resistance in terms of unlock bonuses, which are decent for a tank. The first talent is unlocked. Beyond the Veil is a sustained that grants the warrior a huge +50% dodge chance and immunity to knockdown, stun, and slip effects. This ability does have a -10 stamina regeneration penalty though, so if you want to use it all the time comfortably, you will need to equip a lot of stamina regen gear. The two passives, Soulbrand and Blessing of the Fade, later in the tree upgrade Beyond the Veil further. It's already amazing, but Soulbrand turns all your physical attacks into spirit damage and grants a huge +20% spell resistance bonus, and Blessing of the Fade makes Beyond the Veil increase your movement speed and melee attack speed by 20%, grants an extra 25% spell resistance, and also gives the warrior a permanent +5% spirit damage bonus. So Beyond the Veil is the ability we're building Justice around, since he is literally a spirit warrior. You likely won't be able to use it non-stop immediately after you recruit Justice due to the huge stamina regen penalty, but you can activate it at the start of combat and deactivate it at the end to not drain his stamina unnecessarily. And do remember that in Awakening you have consumable stamina drafts which restore non-mage characters' stamina, so you can always use those during longer fights if you need them. Justice's starting abilities are great overall, though I would have liked to see him have Threaten unlocked as well, since Threaten helps with tanking. But that's easily rectified when you have a couple of talent points available. However, on the whole, this is a great list of starting abilities, so you don't need to respecialize Justice. Moving on, Justice's starting gear is decent but not special. To be fair, he's a weapon and shield warrior, so even with subpar gear, he'll still do his job. But if you have some better items after you're done equipping your damagers, I do recommend replacing his starting gear where possible. The Lamented is a tier 7 mace with +3 strength, +3 constitution, and 3 rune slots. It's nothing special, but at least the bonuses are good for a warrior. Replace it as soon as you can with a weapon that adds stamina regen. Griffin's Crest is a tier 7 kite shield with +1 armor and missile deflection. This is a very weak shield compared to the good ones from Awakening, so replace it ASAP with something better. Sturdy Chainmail Gloves are tier 7 heavy gloves, part of the heavy chainmail set, which reduces fatigue by 3% if the chest gloves and boots are worn together. These gloves aren't the basic chainmail gloves, so they do grant +1 armor and +2 attack, which isn't bad. It's not a priority to replace these, far more important to replace the weapon, shield, and the boots, but be on the lookout for a better pair of gloves. Sturdy Chainmail Armor is a tier 7 heavy chest piece, part of the heavy chainmail set, that grants +3 strength and +2 armor. Again, it's pretty decent just like the gloves, and you don't need to replace it immediately, but it would be great to switch to something with a ton more bonus stats if you can. Heavy Chainmail Boots are tier 7 basic heavy boots, part of the heavy chainmail set. Since the set itself doesn't grant a significant bonus, replace them ASAP with any boots that have bonus stats. Kristoff's Locket is technically not a starting item for Justice, but it might as well be, since you find this as a gift item in Kristoff's camp in the Black Marsh during the quest when you recruit Justice, so you can gift it to him pretty much immediately. It's an amulet that grants +1 to all attributes and +5% dodge chance. Not bad for a starting accessory, and while there are a few amulets you might prefer over this, you could use it for the entire game if you'd like to keep this on Justice for sentimental reasons. Iced Band is a ring that grants +10% cold resistance. There isn't enough cold damage for you to care about cold resistance, so this is useless. Replace it ASAP. Dawn Ring grants +4 strength and -1 cunning. It's also part of the Imperium ring set, but the set is not relevant for a warrior. However, the Dawn Ring in and of itself is great, so you can keep it unless you have a ring with more defensive stats, or if you want to equip the Dawn Ring on a damager for the extra damage. Let's talk recommended attributes. The two important ones to focus on are strength and constitution. You might need just a tiny bit of dexterity, 26 base to be able to unlock shield mastery, and a willpower score of around 25 would be good to ensure Justice has a decent base stamina pool. This tank build focuses mostly on high health and armor rather than defense, so that's why you don't care about dexterity. I prefer to build my tanks in this way anyway, but in Awakening it's even better to build like this for a couple of reasons. One, because with Beyond the Veil and a few other pieces of gear, you can quite easily get to 100% dodge chance or near to it, which will protect you from most enemy attacks. And two, because enemies deal a lot more damage with their attacks and abilities due to this being a high-level expansion, so it's far better to be able to survive any damage that does get through by having high armor and health. I recommend having a lot of strength, 60 to 70 by the end of the game. The most important strength requirement is 52 to be able to equip the highest tier massive armor pieces. There are also two important abilities that require strength to unlock. Grievous Insult at level 25 needs 45 strength, and Massacre at level 27 needs 54 strength. Work towards getting to that 54 strength as quickly as you can, putting 2 points in strength every level up until you get there. After you get to 54, you don't need to put as many points, so you can focus more on Constitution or the other utility attributes. For Constitution, I recommend a score of 40 to 50 by the endgame, but this will also depend on how much you invest in strength and other attributes. You should have at least 30 to 35 Constitution, but more is generally better for a tank who wants high survivability, especially against enemies who can use the Overwhelm ability or other high damage abilities or spells that can't be avoided. The utility attributes are Willpower for stamina, a base score of around 25, maybe 30, Cunning, bring it up to a base score of 16 if you want to max out combat tactics or survival, and optionally put a few points into magic to increase the effectiveness of healing spells and poultices on Justice. For recommended skills, only 3 are crucial: combat training, vitality, and clarity. I've already talked about combat training since Justice has it maxed out, so I'm not going to go into detail again. It gives you access to all the weapon talents and also grants some small bonuses to combat stats. Vitality increases your character's health by 25 per rank. Justice already has the first rank unlocked, and I recommend maxing it out for a total of 100 extra health. It will absolutely help him stay alive in more difficult fights. Clarity increases your character's stamina or mana by 25 per rank for a total of plus 100 stamina at rank 4. While this is more important in general for mages who use mana or martial damagers who use a lot of activated abilities, tank warriors also benefit from having a higher stamina pool, both for using taunting and disabling abilities more frequently, as well as for Justice's build to be able to keep Beyond the Veil sustained, even if you can't fully offset its stamina generation penalty. Once you're done with these three, you could pick up a few ranks of combat tactics to have extra tactic slots for setting up Justice's automatic behavior in combat if you don't want to manually control him. You could also put points into Survival, which increases the character's nature resistance and also lets you see nearby enemies on the map, which can be useful if you'd like to set up a plan for a more difficult encounter. I don't recommend getting any of the crafting skills on Justice since other companions have better starting skills for that. However, if you would like to coat his weapon with a poison for extra damage or a chance to stun enemies, then get 1 rank of poison making, which will allow Justice to use all poisons and grenades. Moving on to recommended abilities. From the Warrior tree, unlock Threaten, Second Wind, Peon's Plight, Grievous Insult, and Massacre. Threaten is a sustain that doubles the threat generated by the warrior's damage, increasing enemy hostility towards the warrior with each melee attack and thus drawing enemies away from other allies. An essential tank talent. Second Wind is an activated talent that restores 80% of the warrior's maximum stamina when used. It has a long 2-minute cooldown, so in most fights you're likely to only use this once. But it's still a great talent to refresh your stamina, especially if your stamina is being drained by Beyond the Veil, or you've had to use a lot of activated talents to taunt or disable enemies in a more difficult fight. Peon's Plight is an activated talent that causes the warrior to strike an enemy with a powerful blow. A successful attack automatically kills a target of normal or lower rank, inflicts a double crit against an elite, and a regular crit against a boss. This is unfortunately far weaker than it may seem at first glance. Normal rank enemies are extremely easy to kill already. This doesn't deal enough damage to elites compared to other talents. It doesn't even have an added effect like a stun or knockdown, yet it still costs too much stamina. So this is useless. You only want to unlock it to gain access to the next 2 talents. Grievous Insult is an activated talent that draws the aggression of all enemies within 10 meters by increasing the warrior's threat, but it also physically pulls them towards the warrior, knocking them down in a process similar to the mass pull ability of Revenants. This is a really cool talent, especially for tanks. It's even better than Taunt due to the fact that it's not only stronger for threat generation, but it also pulls the enemies towards you so you can get them away from other party members and make them focus on you much more easily. It has a 1-minute cooldown, so it's best used towards the beginning of the fight when there's still a significant amount of enemies on the field. Massacre is an activated talent that makes the warrior do a spin attack which deals massive damage to enemies around them. This will deal AoE damage that is approximately equal to a double critical strike. Damage warriors will make the most out of this, but this is still very nice for a tank who has a good amount of strength. The cost to activate this is pretty big, 100 stamina, however, so use it sparingly only when you're surrounded by at least 3 enemies. From the Weapon and Shield tree, unlock Shield Mastery, Juggernaut, Carapace, Air of Insolence, and Bulwark of the Ages. Shield Mastery is a passive that grants bonuses to all active and sustained talents in the Weapon and Shield tree. It's supposed to add extra damage or maximize damage rolls for Shield Bash, Shield Pummel, Assault, and Overpower, but it's bugged in the base game, so I highly recommend having Dane's fixes if you're playing on PC to solve these problems. Furthermore, it grants Shield Defense an extra 5 defense, it grants Shield Wall an extra 10 defense, and it grants Shield Cover an extra 10 missile deflection. Even just for the defensive upgrades, it is great. Juggernaut is a sustained talent that allows the warrior to knock down any enemies who are in the way while the character is moving. Each knockback drains 10 points of stamina regardless of fatigue. It's possible to hit the same target more than once in quick succession, which is a waste of stamina. Normal enemies are knocked down, elites can only be knocked back, and bosses are completely immune. This talent is an exclusive sustained together with Shield Wall, Shield Cover, and Shield Defense, meaning you can only have one of these active at a time. Unfortunately, this is useless. Normal enemies are a joke, and you don't care about knocking elites back. Plus, the Shield Wall sustained is far better for your tank due to the armor bonus and the knockdown immunity. You're only unlocking this to get to the other 2 talents in the row. Carapace is an activated talent that lasts 20 seconds and reduces all damage the warrior takes based on the warrior's Constitution attribute. For example, if you have 30 Constitution, all damage taken is reduced by 15. You will have quite high Constitution with this build, both from investing in the attribute yourself, as well as getting gear with con bonuses and stout runes. With very high constitution, just about any attack could be reduced to 0 damage. But keep in mind, this is only while the talent is active, which is for 20 seconds, after which you have a 1-minute cooldown. So it's best to use this when you're fighting very dangerous enemies, such as bosses, elite assassins, or spellcasters, and your health dips below a certain threshold. Air of Insolence is a sustained talent that increases the warrior's threat towards all enemies in the area around the warrior with a purple shockwave effect every 3 seconds. While the talent says it drains stamina, there isn't any stamina regen penalty, nor any stamina consumed for each shockwave, so you can 100% use this without worrying about your stamina. The talent will automatically get deactivated if your character runs out of stamina for a different reason though, so keep that in mind. This is a great addition for a tank build since it adds even more threat generation than what you already have. Bulwark of the Ages is a passive that upgrades the Carapace talent, making the warrior completely immune to damage for the first 10 seconds of the Carapace effect, and also making them immune to the Overwhelm ability in those first 10 seconds. A great upgrade for a tank for the damage immunity. The immunity to Overwhelm is nice, but the issue is that Carapace has a long cooldown, and so if you're fighting multiple enemies with Overwhelm after those first 10 seconds of Carapace, you'll still be vulnerable to Overwhelm. But this is still absolutely amazing for the damage immunity. From the Spirit Warrior specialization, unlock all the other abilities. Soulbrand is a passive that grants permanent bonuses of plus 5% spirit damage and plus 5% spell resistance to the warrior. It also upgrades Beyond the Veil to grant plus 20% spell resistance and turn all of the warrior's physical attacks into spirit damage attacks to bypass enemy armor entirely. While spirit damage does bypass armor, do note that a few enemies, mostly Darkspawn disciples, are resistant to spirit damage. However, if you combine your spirit damage attacks with a mage's hexes that lower enemy resistances, like Vulnerability Hex and Affliction Hex, then this spirit resistance of the disciples stops being a problem. And otherwise, in general, very few enemies are resistant to spirit damage, so it's a very safe damage type to use. But in any case, Justice doesn't care that much about doing damage with this build, he just wants to taunt enemies into attacking him and survive the damage. So the main purpose of getting this upgrade for Beyond the Veil is the extra spell resistance. Fade Burst is an activated talent that causes an explosion of spirit damage in a 7.5 meter radius field around the warrior, dealing half of the normal damage to the warden and normal amount to companions in the area, including the spirit warrior using it. So remember that you're also damaging yourself with this talent. The warrior also gets a permanent plus 5% spirit damage bonus when unlocking this. The more interesting thing is that this deals double damage to spirits, demons, and undead, so it's useful if you are fighting a group of such creatures and want to deal a large amount of damage to them quickly. Fade Burst is a fairly costly talent, 80 stamina, and the damage scales with your character's willpower, which generally will tend to not be super high. So I don't recommend using this unless you're specifically fighting spirits, demons, or undead, because they take double damage. In other situations, a regular AoE weapon talent is better because it will only damage enemies without any friendly fire. Blessing of the Fade is a passive that grants a permanent plus 5% spirit damage bonus and also upgrades Beyond the Veil with plus 20% movement speed, plus 20% melee attack speed, and plus 25% spell resistance while it's active. This is a great defensive and offensive buff for your warrior and worth unlocking early for Justice since he wants to use Beyond the Veil as much as possible. The second specialization I recommend for Justice is the Reaver. I like this specialization both because it makes Justice a better tank and because I think the Soul Reaving works well for him since he's a spirit possessing a corpse, so feasting on the energy of enemy corpses seems like it would be something he needs to do in order to survive. So this specialization is chosen for both gameplay and flavor reasons. From unlocking it, you get plus 1 constitution and plus 5 physical resistance, the same unlock bonuses as the Spirit Warrior. Decent defensive stats. I recommend the first 3 abilities from here: Devour, Frightening Appearance, and Aura of Pain. Devour heals the warrior for a decent amount based on the number of enemy corpses around them within 5 meters. It's a similar ability to the mage's death magic spell, but it's instant rather than sustained, which is better. You can just choose to activate this whenever you have at least 2 or more corpses around you for a decent heal, and then immediately get on with the fight. It's cheap, though it does have a 30-second cooldown, so you can't use it super often. It works well as an extra heal when poultices or spells are on cooldown, and you have a bunch of fallen enemies to take advantage of. Do note that this ability scales somewhat with spell power, so any extra points in magic you have from level ups or bonuses to all attributes will increase your healing from Devour. Frightening Appearance is an activated talent that makes a target cower in fear if they fail a mental resistance check versus the warrior's strength. It also buffs the threat generated by taunt by 100. It's supposed to also increase the threat generated by your warrior's attacks when Threaten is active, but it isn't properly implemented in the base game. However, as per usual, it works if you have Dane's fixes. This talent is much more useful than it seems at first glance. It will completely disable powerful physical enemies such as ogres for a long time because their mental resistance stat is low. It functions essentially the same as the horror spell, but it doesn't have to deal with magic resistance. It's an amazing disabling talent, not to mention the upgrade to the tanking abilities. Aura of Pain is a sustained ability that deals spirit damage to the warrior and hostile targets within 4 meters, but also gives the warrior a penalty of -5 health regen. Having higher spirit resistance will not decrease the self-inflicted damage since it's a special type of damage. Do note that unlike mana or stamina regen, health regeneration rate is capped on the low side at 0, so characters can't lose health over time when they have technically negative health regeneration. While this will make Justice take some damage himself while active, I do think it's very useful to damage nearby enemies and draw some extra aggression onto him as well. Plus, he already has some bonuses to spirit damage from Beyond the Veil, so the damage against enemies will be increased too. This is an optional sustained talent for the build, though I personally recommend it. If you don't feel comfortable with something that will reduce Justice's health, then don't use it. But if you do want to give it a shot, I recommend activating it at the start of combat or when Justice is surrounded by at least 2 or 3 enemies, and then deactivating it whenever Justice isn't surrounded by enemies. If you use it, make sure to heal Justice often with Devour, health poultices, or spells from mage party members. The final specialization I recommend unlocking at level 21 is the Templar. You don't necessarily need a third specialization if you don't want one, but as a spirit possessing a corpse, I imagine that Justice would have some innate anti-magic abilities. If you unlock Templar, you'll get +2 magic and +3 mental resistance. The bonus magic is good because it increases healing effectiveness from health poultices, spells, and Devour, but the mental resistance is useless because most enemy abilities require physical resistance checks, not mental ones. From the Templar, you can unlock the first 2 abilities. The last 2 are also fine, but they're not really needed in Awakening and certainly not for this build. Righteous Strike is a passive that causes each of the Templar's melee hits against a spellcaster to drain mana equal to 25% of the damage dealt, and also restore the same amount of stamina to the Templar. Draining mana from spellcasters is nice, though disabling them is far more useful so that they don't get to use any of their mana. Any stamina you gain from this passive is a nice bonus. Cleanse Area is an activated talent that removes all spell effects other than Glyph of Neutralization in a 10-meter area around the Templar. This doesn't remove persistent spell effects like the ones created by Blizzard or Earthquake. This is only useful in a few mage-dominated fights, and I can only think of a few such encounters in Origins, not any in Awakening. So unless multiple party members got paralyzed, or someone is affected by an extremely dangerous spell they can't survive, like Curse of Mortality, you won't need to use this. However, it is nice to have as an emergency button. Moving on to recommended gear. As part of recommending items for Awakening, I'll mostly recommend items you can obtain in Awakening. I can't usually recommend DAO items because you don't always import your Warden, and even if you do, it's not guaranteed you'll have every item in your inventory. I will mention something from DAO if I think it would be particularly nice, or if Awakening doesn't have enough good options, but otherwise you'll have to figure out for yourself whether an Origins item is suitable for the build. To make that easier, I'll explain the main bonuses to look for. First and foremost, remember that you want a lot of combat stamina regeneration so that you're able to use the Beyond the Veil Spirit Warrior ability without having to constantly drink stamina drafts or else keep turning it off so your other sustained abilities don't turn off when you run out of stamina. So you're looking for that on all item types where possible, though some item types won't have it. On weapons other than stamina regen, you want strength, extra damage, attack, and armor penetration is nice though not necessary. Shields are generally going to have mostly defensive stats, with the best one being Absorbs Damage, a new stat in Awakening that reduces the damage you take by a certain percentage. The other good ones are Dodge Chance, Defense, Missile Deflection, which also shows up as Missile Avoidance or Chance to Avoid Missiles. For armor, you're looking for pieces that have a high base armor score and ideally also bonuses to armor. The other very nice bonuses are Dodge Chance, Constitution or Health, Stamina Regen, and Strength. Spell Resistance, Physical Resistance, Elemental Resistances, Defense, and Missile Deflection are good, but not crucial. For accessories, you mostly want bonuses to all attributes, Strength, Constitution or Health, Willpower or Stamina, Stamina Regen, and defensive bonuses like Dodge Chance and Spell Resistance, or the other defensive stats mentioned for shields and armor. Now that you know the general stats to look for on gear, here are my personal item recommendations. For weapons, here are the 3 best ones. Kalak is a tier 8 longsword with 3 rune slots that grants plus 10% crit or backstab damage and plus 3 electricity damage. You can obtain it by repairing the broken sword item in the Kalharal trade quarter. The reason this is the best weapon for Justice is that it's part of the Partha Kalak set, which grants plus 5 defense and plus 2 combat stamina regeneration if you equip this longsword together with the Partha shield, which is the highest bonus to stamina regen you can get from a weapon and shield combo in Awakening. Dumat's Spine is a tier 7 to 9 longsword with 3 rune slots that grants plus 0.75 combat stamina regeneration, plus 6 attack, and plus 25% crit or backstab damage. You can loot it from a weapon stand in the throne room of Vigil's Keep as soon as you unlock the area after the starting mission, so it's nice to have as an early weapon before you can get to Kalak or something else. It's part of the Dumat's weapon set, together with Dumat's Claw, which is a dagger, however, so I wouldn't really recommend using this if you have a rogue dual wielder that would benefit from using it more. The reason it's a good pick for Justice is that it has that bonus to stamina regeneration. The final good option that still has stamina regen would be the crafted longsword Vigilance. It's a tier 9 longsword that baseline has bonuses of plus 1 to all attributes, plus 2 attack, and plus 0.5 armor penetration, but you get to customize its stats by choosing from a few options when Master Wade asks you what you want during the Worked to the Bone quest. Choose Raw Power for the first question because it adds plus 1.5 armor penetration and plus 5 fire damage to the weapon, but the truly important choice is the one about your preference for materials, where you should choose a weapon that is easy to swing because that grants plus 0.5 combat stamina regen and plus 50 stamina. However, as nice as this sword is, you also have the option of making it a greatsword, so you'll have to decide which version of the sword you want more for a specific character. In my opinion, Kalak is much easier to obtain, and it's the better choice for Justice out of the weapons available in Awakening, so you should craft Vigilance for someone else. For shields, here are the best 3. Partha is a tier 8 heavy shield with plus 2 cunning, plus 15 defense, plus 5% dodge chance, missile deflection, and 10% damage absorption. It's part of the Partha Kalak set together with the Kalak longsword, which as I mentioned has the highest bonus to stamina regen you can get from Awakening weapons and shields, plus 2. You can loot this from the remains of Dylan in the Kalharal trade quarter. If you don't want the stamina regen, then there are 2 other very powerful shields in Awakening. Heartwood Shield is a tier 9 kite shield with plus 15 defense, plus 10% nature resistance, missile deflection, plus 20 physical resistance, and 15% damage absorption. You can get Wade to craft this for you as part of the Heart of the Forest subquest, part of a Master's work, which you'll get once you defeat the old one in the Wending Wood. You can choose to craft a shield or a bow, so you'll have to decide which one you value more out of the 2. Landsmeet Shield is a tier 9 kite shield that grants plus 12 defense, plus 30% electricity resistance, plus 50 stamina, plus 15 physical resistance, and 12% damage absorption. You can loot it from a Dragon Thrall in the Silverite Mine during the Righteous Path main quest. It can be a drop from Rylock during Freedom for Anders, and it's also a final reward for doing the Smuggler's Run quest in Amaranthine if you side with the Smugglers. If you are importing your Warden from Origins and you have the Return to Ostagar DLC items in your inventory, then there is a weapon and shield combo that would be absolutely perfect for Justice due to the huge bonus to stamina regen the set grants. The Kaelin's arm set, comprised of Merrick's blade and Kaelin's shield. The set bonus is plus 5 damage and plus 5 combat stamina regen, and on top of that the longsword also grants a bit of stamina regen itself. You can find both these items by following the quest and Return to Ostagar and Origins. Merrick's Blade is a tier 5 to 7 longsword with 2 to 3 rune slots, which grants plus 0.75 combat health and stamina regen, plus 6 damage versus Darkspawn, and weakens nearby Darkspawn. The weakening property doesn't do anything in the vanilla game, but if you have Dane's Fixes, it will reduce the attack and defense of nearby Darkspawn, similar to the Miasma spell, which is super useful especially in Awakening where Darkspawn are more plentiful than in Origins. Kaelin's Shield is a tier 5 to 7 kite shield that grants plus 1 armor and plus 20 missile deflection. Yes, the shield by itself isn't remarkable, but that set bonus more than makes up for it. So if you have Kaelin's arms, give them to Justice since that will be over half of his stamina regeneration needs taken care of. Moving on to armor, there aren't any chest pieces or armor sets with stamina regeneration in Awakening, so you'll have to choose chest pieces with other good stats and try to get stamina regen from other armor pieces. Or you could use a chest piece or armor set with stamina regen from Origins if you have one. Venture is a tier 9 heavy chest piece with 3 rune slots that grants plus 12 constitution and plus 12 defense. You can loot it from the Avar Deep Crypt in the basement of Vigil's Keep that you can unlock with 4 keys, 3 of which you find in the Deep Roads area beneath Vigil's Keep during the side quest, The Wraith's Vengeance. Clamshell Plate Armor is a Tier 9 massive chest piece with 3 rune slots that grants plus 8 strength, plus 6 defense, missile deflection, and plus 25 physical resistance. You can buy it from Haren in the Vigil's Keep courtyard for a bit over 155 gold. Golem Shell Armor is a Tier 9 massive chest piece with 3 rune slots that grants plus 8 strength, plus 8 constitution, plus 2 armor, plus 25% fire resistance, and plus 20 physical resistance. You can get this crafted by Master Wade as part of the Golem's Might subquest part of a Master's Work. For gloves, the only ones that are worth recommending are the Storm Chaser Gauntlets, Tier 9 heavy gloves that grant plus 4 dexterity, plus 9 defense, plus 3 armor, plus 30% electricity resistance, and plus 2 combat stamina regen. They're part of the Storm Chaser armor set, but the rest of the set sucks, so the gloves are the only piece worth wearing. You can buy them from Haren in the Vigil's Keep courtyard for a bit over 118 gold. There are other decent gloves in Awakening, but nothing with stamina regen and nothing with as many good bonuses as the Storm Chaser gauntlets. For boots, the best ones from Awakening are the Fleet Feet, Tier 9 heavy boots that grant plus 4 dexterity, plus 9 defense, plus 10% spell resistance, plus 10% dodge chance, and missile deflection. You can buy them from the bartender at the Crown and Lion Inn in Amaranthine for a bit over 40 gold. The Greaves of Herald's Defense are Tier 8 massive boots that grant plus 6 constitution, which you can obtain by repairing the ancient boots at the forge in the Cal Herald Trade Quarter. They're fine, but I definitely recommend using the Fleet Feet if you can. If you imported your Warden from Origins and you have the Return to Ostergard DLC items, then Kaelin's Greaves would be a wonderful pick here, better than the Fleet Feet. They're Tier 5 to 7 massive boots that grant plus 1 armor and plus 20% dodge chance. You don't need to use the entire Kaelin's armor set because it doesn't have anything towards stamina regeneration, but the boots themselves are insanely good for the 20% dodge chance. Finally, as a recommendation from Origins for a full armor set or just some pieces from it, the superior dragon scale armor that Wade crafts for the Warden in Origins is perfect for Justice, whether the heavy or massive version. I personally recommend the heavy set because you can further upgrade it by using the unique heavy chest piece Yvonne the Great's Mail, which you can buy in Origins from Haren. This chest piece combines with Wade's superior heavy set and allows you to get the set bonus of minus 20% fatigue and plus 5 defense. Normally, you'd get 50% fire resistance, plus 1 combat stamina regen, and plus 25 stamina from the regular set chest piece. Yvonne the Great's Mail, however, grants plus 1 combat health and stamina regen, plus 6 armor, plus 10% dodge chance, and plus 10 missile deflection. The gloves and boots from Wade's set also grant plus 0.5 stamina regeneration each, which is nice if you want to use the full set for that big fatigue reduction, but you could also just mix and match since the Storm Chaser gauntlets from Awakening are much better with plus 2 stamina regen and other good bonuses. For helmets, there aren't really great ones in Awakening, so just use whatever you find that has decent stats. Helm of Herald's Defense would be decent, as it's a Tier 8 massive helm with plus 4 constitution, plus 6 defense, plus 10% spell resistance, and plus 15 mental resistance. You can find it in the treasury of the Cal Herald Trade Quarter. Something from Origins can also work if you imported your Warden, such as Corruption, a Tier 7 massive helmet that grants plus 5 dexterity, plus 1 armor, and plus 75% spirit resistance, and which is looted from a Herlock General during the final battle in Denrim. Moving on to accessories. For belts, there's a few pretty good ones for tanks. Cinch of Skillful Maneuvering grants plus 2 to all attributes, plus 14% spell resistance, and plus 15% dodge chance. It's a DLC-related item that you'll have in your inventory from the start if you get an achievement in the Witch Hunt DLC for gathering all the lore of Kadash Taig. Girdle of Kal Haral grants plus 6 defense, plus 10% fire and cold resistance, and plus 10 physical resistance. You can loot it from Haral's sarcophagus in the Kal Haral Trade Quarter. Gladiator's Belt grants plus 2 strength, dexterity, and willpower, and plus 4 attack. You can obtain this by completing the puzzle with the 6 pillars in the Black Marsh Undying, after which you can loot the runic pedestal in the real world to get the belt. There is one great belt from Origins if you have it from importing your Warden, Andrew's Blessing, which grants plus 2 to all attributes, plus 20% nature resistance, plus 1 combat mana and stamina regeneration, which means plus 2 of either, and plus 10 physical resistance. This can be purchased from the Circle Tower Quartermaster in Origins for a bit over 106 gold. For amulets, you will likely need the one amulet that grants a lot of stamina regeneration, unless you have the Kalen's Arms Weapon and Shield set from Origins, in which case you may already have enough stamina regen to offset the -10 penalty of Beyond the Veil. The amulet that grants stamina regen is Nature's Blessing, which grants plus 1.5 combat health, mana, and stamina regen. In total, that means it grants plus 3 stamina regen because the mana regen turns into stamina and vice versa, depending on the class of the character equipping the item. You can loot this from a sarcophagus in the Kal Haral Trade Quarter after solving the runestone puzzle. If you already have enough stamina regen from other items and the plus 0.5 that you get from one of the ranks of the combat training skill, then you can choose to equip an amulet that has good defensive bonuses instead. Here are 3 good ones. Scout's Medal grants plus 2 dexterity, plus 10 constitution, plus 2 armor, and plus 50 stamina. You can buy it from Uriah in the Vigil's Keep throne room for a bit over 84 gold. Absolutely worth it for these stats, either for Justice or another character who will appreciate extra health and stamina or mana specifically. Seeker's Chain grants plus 2 to all attributes, plus 1 combat health regeneration, and plus 3 defense. You can buy it from Glassrick the Weaponsmith and Amaranthine for 10 gold and a half. Illumination grants plus 3 to all attributes and plus 10 mental resistance, and you can obtain it by completing the stone puzzle in the Wending Wood. Though, of course, the last 2 amulets are going to be desirable for most of your characters due to the bonuses to all attributes being generally useful, so you'll have to pick who gets to have them. Justice's unique amulet, Kristoff's Locket, is fine enough, but only offers plus 1 to all attributes and plus 5% dodge chance, so it doesn't really compare to these other amulets. For rings, there are a few good options, but nothing is extraordinary. The first ring I'll mention isn't that good, but it is a special gift for Justice, so that's why I'm including it here. Delirium Ring grants plus 6 willpower and plus 10% spell resistance. It's restricted to Justice, and you can find the gift item in a chest in a small room of Kal Haral's main hall. The Dawn Ring that Justice starts with is good enough due to the plus 4 strength, so you can keep it as one of your rings if you don't have anything better. Corrin's Proposal grants plus 2 to all attributes, and you can obtain it by completing the side quest The Trail of Love in the Black Marsh. Bonuses to all attributes are nice for most characters though, so it's possible someone will need this more than Justice. Tingler grants plus 4 constitution, plus 0.75 combat health regeneration, and plus 15% to healing effects received. You can loot this in the basement under Vigil's Keep, behind a secret door next to a statue of Andraste. You just have to activate the torch next to the statue to open the hidden room. Ring of the Warrior grants plus 2 strength and plus 2 dexterity. You can have a few copies of this ring. If you import your Warden from Origins, you can have one from the Drifter's Cache side quest in the Deep Roads. If you have a New Orlesian Warden, who is a warrior or a rogue, they'll start with one automatically equipped. And Oghren also has one equipped when you recruit him in Awakening. It's a perfectly decent ring for warriors, although I'd say that the Dawn Ring and either Corrin's Proposal or Tingler would be better. The usual suspects from Origins, the Key to the City, and the Life Giver are also amazing for either Justice or the other characters, since these 2 rings are just that overpowered. Key to the City's main draw is a plus 2 to all attributes, whereas Life Giver grants plus 10 constitution and a lot of health regen. When it comes to runes and consumables, I mostly recommend focusing on weapon and armor runes. While Justice could slightly improve his damage and utility by using a poison on his longsword, poisons are best used on melee characters who attack quickly, aka dual wielders. So personally, I don't bother with poisons on my weapon and shield or two-handed characters. Grenades are nice, but Justice already has a few AoE abilities and doesn't care that much about dealing damage, so he doesn't need to use grenades. For weapon runes, I mostly recommend ones that add damage to your strikes. Flame and Lightning runes are best. Flame because Darkspawn and Undead are weak to fire, and Darkspawn are the main enemy type you fight in Awakening. Lightning because, other than the Queen of the Black Marsh, very few enemies are resistant to electricity damage. And electricity also has the added bonus of draining stamina from non-mage enemies. However, because in Awakening you end up fighting a ton of Darkspawn, I also recommend high-tier Silverite runes, because those add far more damage against Darkspawn specifically. Unless you have some high-tier weapon runes imported from Origins, you'll have to craft runes for yourself. Plus, Awakening has higher rune tiers available above Grandmaster, so you'd likely want to upgrade your runes to Paragon tier if you have the money to spend on materials. For armor runes, the best ones are Stout runes, which grant Constitution. Remember that Justice will have access to the Weapon and Shield Carapace talent, which can essentially reduce the damage he receives from enemy attacks and abilities to 0 if his Constitution is high enough. Plus, extra Constitution means more max health, which will also make him far more likely to survive damage even when Carapace isn't available. So absolutely fill Justice's chest piece with 3 high-tier Stout runes if you can. For consumables, make sure to have health poultices in your inventory to top up Justice's health when it gets too low, but more importantly, carry a decent amount of stamina drafts, especially earlier on when you may not have enough stamina regeneration to offset the -10 stamina regen penalty of Beyond the Veil. You will also find the stamina drafts useful for your warrior and rogue damagers anyway, who may occasionally get too low in stamina to be able to use their high damage abilities, so they're not just for Justice. Finally, let's talk about tactics and party composition. In terms of party composition, my general recommendation will always stay the same. One tank, one mage, and at least one ranged character, whether archer or mage. By tank, I mean a character who can draw enemy aggression away from their squishier allies. Normally, this is a warrior who can use Threaten, Taunt, and Grievous Insult to generate more threat towards enemies, though an Arcane Warrior Mage can also act as an effective tank without these warrior talents if they use certain spells that draw a lot of threat. In any case, with this build, Justice will do very well as a tank, so you don't need a second one. And unless you know what you're doing in terms of juggling threat, I really don't recommend having 2 tanks in the party. One tank is more than enough. Mages are always useful no matter your party composition, whether for damage, healing, buffs, debuffs, and disabling effects. They're super versatile and powerful, and so unless you're doing a challenge or roleplay run of some sort where you're limiting yourself to not using magic, I highly recommend having at least one mage in your party. I usually bring 2 along. And as for having a ranged character, it's mostly due to the fact that if you have a full melee party, your characters will get stuck a lot in corridors and other cramped spaces, trying to maneuver around each other instead of attacking enemies. It's pretty annoying, and you can avoid this positioning problem by having a mixed range party with at least one ranged character, if not 2. It's also very nice to have ranged abilities and attacks, because it means you'll be able to start damaging and affecting enemies much faster without needing to run up to them to do so. However, this is all the advice I have for party compositions. Ultimately, it's up to you who you choose to bring along, because you should have a party that you feel comfortable playing and which includes the companions you like. My recommendations are just suggestions based on my experience and playstyle preferences, so don't take them as rules. Especially if you're playing on easy or normal, pretty much anything can work. For Justice's tactics, as a weapon and shield tank, he doesn't have too many activated talents that he needs. You'll want to set up his sustained talents first, then add the few activated talents he cares about, and finally have tactics for using health poultices if his HP gets too low, and stamina drafts if his stamina gets too low. First up, the sustained talents. Beyond the Veil is the most powerful sustained of the build due to the immunity to stuns, knockdowns, and slip effects, and the 50% dodge chance. I recommend setting up 2 tactic slots for this, one to activate this when in combat mode, and one to deactivate it in exploration mode. This ensures you don't have your stamina drained by the ability while you're out of combat, though if you have enough stamina regeneration to offset the -10 penalty, then you can simply have a single tactic that keeps it active at all times. Self, any, activate X. Shield Wall is the second most important sustain to keep active at all times, since it increases your armor, missile deflection, and also adds a bit of defense when upgraded with Shield Mastery, and also gives you immunity to knockdowns if for any reason you don't have Beyond the Veil active. Air of Insolence can be kept active at all times because it doesn't drain any stamina and continuously generates threat towards all enemies in a 7.5 meter area around you. A perfect tank ability. Threaten is great to have active all the time for a tank, since it makes all your attacks generate more threat. However, you may not necessarily need this due to having both Grievous Insult and Air of Insolence, which are very powerful taunting abilities from Awakening. But it doesn't have high stamina upkeep, so you can keep it active if you have the space for it in your tactics. Aura of Pain is the final sustained I recommend, but it's only optional, since it will also deal some damage to Justice if he uses it. He should have plenty of health to not be bothered by this, but it's up to you if you want to use it, since it's not strictly necessary for the build. I recommend setting up 2 tactics for it, activate it when Justice is surrounded by at least 2 enemies, and deactivate it if Justice is surrounded by no enemies. For the activated talents, there are only a few that you genuinely want in your automated tactics. Grievous Insult, Carapace, Second Wind, Devour, Massacre, and Frightening Appearance. The rest are great if you have the space, or else should be used manually. Grievous Insult is the much better activated taunting ability to use over Taunt, so it will replace Taunt as the top priority here. Use it when your warrior is surrounded by at least 2 enemies. That likely means you also have other enemies in the 10-meter radius, so you'll taunt and pull all of them even if they aren't close enough to count as surrounding you. Carapace will reduce the damage you take by a lot, potentially even to 0 if your constitution is high enough, and of course the upgraded version is guaranteed to make you immune to damage for the first 10 seconds. So activate this when Justice's HP is below 50%, to keep him protected until he gets healed. Second Wind should be used when your stamina is below 20% because it restores 80% of your stamina. It has a long cooldown though, so I do still recommend having a tactic for stamina drafts that's lower in priority if you have the space, so that it activates if your stamina is too low and Second Wind is on cooldown. Massacre deals a very nice amount of AoE damage, but it has a high stamina cost to activate, so use it only if Justice is surrounded by at least 3 enemies. Devour can heal you a decent amount, though you don't have any option to set up in tactics to use this when you have a certain number of enemy corpses nearby. So the best way I've found to set this up is to use it when you're around 60 to 70% HP. There will likely be at least 1 or 2 corpses nearby, and the heal from Devour isn't too big, so you might as well use it a bit more frequently. Frightening Appearance should be used on elite rank enemies. Bosses may resist this effect because they can be immune to fear type effects, so I recommend it specifically against elites, aka enemies with yellow names. Taunt isn't really needed anymore, at least from my testing of this build, because the combination of Air of Insolence, Grievous Insult, and Threaten was more than enough to keep enemies focused on Justice. You can still keep it on your ability bar as a manual backup in case Grievous Insult is on cooldown and the 2 Taunting Sustains aren't enough to keep the enemy attention on your tank, but you don't need to use a tactic slot. Shield Bash and Shield Pummel are nice to use to disable enemies, particularly spellcasters, but unless you max out combat tactics, you likely won't have enough tactic slots to add these in there as well. If you do have the space, you can either make Justice use these on enemies using magic type of attacks, aka spellcasters, or if you have other party members who are better at disabling spellcasters, use these talents on the highest health enemy or the nearest visible enemy. Overpower is best used on enemies who are frozen or petrified to shatter them, if they're elite or lower rank. If you don't have a mage in the party who freezes or petrifies enemies often, then you can add this to the tactics in a similar way to the previous 2 talents on a spellcaster, the highest health enemy, or the nearest visible enemy. But just as with the other 2, it's not strictly necessary for your tactics, so only add it after you have all the important things set up. There are 2 abilities that can be useful, but which I don't recommend trying to automate at all: Fade Burst and Cleanse Area. Fade Burst is only useful if you're fighting a group of spirits, demons, or undead, and you can't set up anything related to creature types in tactics. So only use it manually if you're fighting such a group and you think the AoE damage would be useful to get rid of them faster, since these specific enemy types take double damage from Fade Burst. Cleanse Area I've only found useful if a couple of party members got affected by a disabling spell effect like a freeze, petrify, paralyzation, crushing prison, or some such thing, or else if they're affected by Curse of Mortality, which makes them unable to heal and also deals damage to them. If you do find yourself in a situation like that, then sure, use Cleanse Area, but do be aware of the fact that it will disable friendly spell effects as well, so you may have to reactivate certain spells on your mage party members. Finally, remember to add a tactic for Justice to use a health poultice when his HP gets below a certain threshold. On lower difficulties, I recommend choosing 30 to 40% HP, whereas on higher difficulties, it's best to have it at 60% due to enemies being likely to use dangerous abilities like Grab and Overwhelm when your characters are under 60% health. I recommend choosing the tactic that tells Justice to use the lowest tier available poultice, because this means he can use whichever one is available at the time, just in case you run out of a certain type of potions or it's on cooldown. Of course, if you have 1 or 2 mages with multiple healing spells, like both heal and group heal, you may feel like Justice is very safe, especially in combination with him having Devour to heal himself and Carapace to protect himself from damage for 20 seconds. So in that case, you can skip the health poultice tactics if you want to use the extra slot for an ability. For the stamina draft tactic, it's a similar situation. I'd recommend having one at the very bottom of your tactics that makes Justice use the lowest tier available draft when his stamina is under 20%. Not just to keep Beyond the Veil from draining your stamina if you haven't offset its penalty, but also to have enough stamina to use your strong activated talents. But if you have high enough stamina regen and feel comfortable with just the occasional use of Second Wind, you could also skip the stamina draft tactic so you can set up an extra ability instead. In conclusion, Justice's build is a super high survivability tank build, taunting enemies very effectively with warrior and weapon and shield talents, and being extremely tanky with Beyond the Veil, Shield Wall, and Carapace. You get tons of bonuses to your defensive stats from gear, and could even reach 100% dodge chance from the combo of Beyond the Veil and dodge chance gear if you wanted to. Honestly, Justice will likely not even need to be healed by a mage spell or health poultice most of the time, just because he has such a high health pool from investing into Constitution and getting a lot more bonuses to Constitution and health from his gear and armor runes. So I feel pretty comfortable calling this the unkillable tank build. Awakening gets pretty crazy since you're much higher level and get access to these super powerful new abilities like the Spirit Warrior ones, so it can be very fun to push companions like Justice who have this more intense vibe to them, completely in a certain direction to see just how far their build can go. This is still not really a min-maxing build by any means, but it is extremely powerful just due to how overpowered things feel in Awakening. I hope you found this build guide for Justice in Dragon Age Origins Awakening useful. If you enjoyed this, stick around for future guides and other videos I plan to make about Dragon Age and other games I care about. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, or maybe become a channel member. Everything helps. This has been B-Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.